Since the beginning of his life, Kyle Abbott has been caught in the middle of the conflict between his Abbott heritage and the ever-present presence of Victor Newman. Over the course of his most recent employment with Newman Enterprises, where he managed the fashion company Glissade, he has been brought closer to Victor's area of influence. Nevertheless, this has been a double-edged sword. Despite the fact that he has acquired influence, he is becoming increasingly worried about the control that Victor has over him, and consequently, over his link to the Newman lineage. Because of the pressure that comes from being devoted to his family, Kyle is able to detect that his father, Jack, is becoming increasingly distant. One evening, after a particularly stressful dinner with the family at Abbott Manor, Jack takes Kyle aside and speaks with him alone. It is quite obvious that Jack is irritated by Kyle's unwavering commitment to the Newmans. "You are an Abbott, Kyle," he continues in a commanding tone, "and your position comes with responsibilities. The Newmans will continue to make use of you for as long as they require your services, but the Abbott name, which represents your family, will remain in existence forever." Kyle is pondering his allegiances and the future he wants to create for himself and his small son, Harrison, and the words of Jack continue to reverberate in his thoughts after he has finished thinking about them. A few days later, Kyle is summoned to Victor's office to answer some questions, overtly suggesting that Glissade will serve as a stepping stone for something more significant. Victor, who has always been the master planner, makes a subtle suggestion. Nevertheless, it is very evident to Kyle that Victor is working toward his own goals, and these goals do not put Kyle's dreams at the forefront. As a matter of fact, Victor makes it quite apparent that he anticipates Kyle to demonstrate his allegiance, not only to the Newmans, but also to Victor's goal for the company. Kyle's annoyance reaches a boiling point. In the course of his time at Glissade, he comes to the realization that his position there is more of a power play for Victor than it is a genuine opportunity for him to establish his own legacy. As soon as Kyle voices his uncertainties, Victor instantly silences him by reminding him that loyalty is a two-way street and hinting that the Newman influence is the only genuine method for Kyle to achieve power. In the moment that Kyle is leaving, he is confronted with the harsh reality that remaining with the Newmans will require him to give up his autonomy, his ideals, and potentially even his relationship with his own family. The mentorship that Victor is providing him starts to look more like manipulation, and he understands that he is at a crossroads. Kyle makes the decision to get back in touch with the Abbott family after being shaken up by Victor's ultimatum. He goes to Jabot to meet with Jack and Billy for a casual gathering, during which they discuss the most recent developments in the company. Billy, who is known for being a mischievous sibling, is able to detect the struggle that is occurring within Kyle and inquires about his position at Newman Enterprises. As Jack and Billy present their argument for Abbott's allegiance, Kyle makes an effort to defend his viewpoint, but he realizes that he is weakening in his defense. As the discussion progresses, Kyle's sense of belonging to the Abbott family becomes more apparent. He comes to the realization that his family has faith in him, not as a means for them to pursue their own interests, but rather as a component of a heritage that they are all working to maintain. For the first time in what seems like months, Kyle is able to experience a sense of belonging, and he begins to question the reasons he is fighting for. During the evening, Jack takes a seat with Kyle by himself and offers him a position at Jabot, one in which he would have the freedom to determine the nature of his function. As Kyle is aware that this choice could cause him to lose his relationship with Victor, he is divided. However, Jack's comments were able to cut through the cloud of uncertainty. "Kyle, the Abbotts are always there for each other. In spite of the fact that Newman may offer you power, we offer you family." Kyle is unable to sleep as he evaluates his choices throughout the night. It is well known to him that if he decides to go with Jabot, he will be going against Victor and maybe jeopardizing his position at Glissade, where he has spent a lot of time and effort. However, in the end, Kyle's commitment to his Abbott ancestry proves to be the deciding factor, as he decides to prioritize his family over the power promises made by Newman Enterprises. In the morning of the following day, he arrives at Victor's office, fully prepared to resign. Unsurprisingly, Victor is not taken aback by this. On the other hand, he sneers. "I knew the Abbott blood ran thick. But Kyle, you should know that you are leaving behind more than just a job," the speaker further stated. Kyle is reminded that he has destroyed a bridge that may never be rebuilt due to the fact that Victor's parting comments include a threat that is not directly stated. Now that he is aware that he has chosen the best decision for both himself and his son, Kyle departs with a mixture of trepidation and a newly discovered drive. When he finally makes it back to Jabat, he is overcome with a feeling of belonging that helps him to fill the gap that has been growing ever since he started working for Newman Enterprises. Kyle continues to exert a significant amount of influence on the day-to-day operations of Glissade, despite the fact that he has left Newman. He is also well aware of the weaknesses that the brand must contend with. He proceeds to orchestrate a series of seemingly small strategic errors with the intention of weakening the corporation from within. This is a form of silent protest and revenge against Victor. He moves key individuals about, gives his approval to marketing efforts that are useless, and purposefully delays manufacturing timetables, all with the knowledge that this will cause consumer trust to decrease. Upon observing the reduction in Glissade's performance, Victor develops a sense of suspicion, yet he is unable to identify the underlying cause. As the sales figures continue to decline, rumors of Glissade's instability begin to spread across Genoa City. These rumors put doubt on Victor's ability to keep his iron hold over his corporate empire. When Kyle realizes that he has hit Victor where it hurts the most, in his pride, he feels a sense of satisfaction that is both quiet and satisfying. Although Kyle's act of sabotage offers him a sense of joy, Jack is beginning to observe that his son is becoming increasingly obsessed with bringing Glissade to its knees. In a show of concern, he takes Kyle aside and cautions him against allowing his resentment to overwhelm him. It is said by Jack that you have already won, Kyle. You do not have to lower yourself to Victor's level in order to demonstrate your worth. It is not about vengeance that the Abbott name means. Rather, it is about honesty. Even though Kyle is listening, he is having a hard time letting go of his wrath, because he believes that his acts are a form of retribution for the way in which Victor used him. He is confident that if he runs Glissade into the ground, he will demonstrate to Victor that he is not effortlessly influenced. However, Jack's remarks continue to linger, and Kyle starts to wonder if he is allowing his grudge to overshadow his new life at Jabat. The activities of Kyle attract the notice of Newman's legal team, which then begins an investigation into the possibility of mismanagement as Glissade's downfall continues to swiftly accelerate. Victor, who is wary of Kyle's continued influence, gives the order for a comprehensive investigation of Glissade's business practices. Kyle is aware that time is running out, but he is resolute in his commitment to see the plan through to completion. Suddenly, Victor's daughter, Victoria, approaches Kyle. This is an unexpected turn of events. As a result of her awareness of his actions and comprehension of his reasons for doing them, she even feels some sense of sympathy for him. On the other hand, she cautions him that the consequences of his vendetta could have repercussions that extend beyond Victor alone. It could do harm to innocent colleagues and destroy his own reputation. Kyle is forced to acknowledge the wider repercussions of his choices as a result of her words, which cause him to halt. After becoming aware of the seriousness of his actions, Kyle is forced to make a challenging decision. He admits to Jack that he was responsible for Glissade's downfall. However, despite his disappointment, Jack acknowledges Kyle's sincerity and assists him in formulating a plan to minimize the impact of the situation. Together, they come up with a strategy that will protect the Abbotts from any consequences that may arise, while also providing Glissade with the opportunity to recuperate. Kyle makes one more attempt to reach Victor and offers a truce, albeit with some reluctance. He acknowledges that his anger was the driving force behind his destructive behavior and admits that he was the one who sabotaged the project. Although he is enraged, Victor respects Kyle's honesty, and to everyone's surprise, agrees to a ceasefire that is only temporary. However, he cautions Kyle that if he continues to betray the Newman family, there would be no more opportunities for him to make amends. Now that he is back at Jabat, Kyle is working to restore his reputation while directing his efforts toward improved business operations. As a result of taking Jack's counsel to heart, he has embraced the Abbott principles and committed himself to a new chapter that is free from feeling resentment. The realization dawns on him that the source of his actual power is not destruction, but rather the establishment of a legacy that Harrison can be proud of. Kyle is able to redeem himself by his recommitment to Jabot, which allows him to regain the trust of his family and demonstrate to himself that he is more capable than his need for vengeance. In the moment that he is observing Glissade's recovery, he is filled with a sense of tranquility, knowing that he has at long last discovered his position within the Abbott family, a new heritage to carry on. As a result of the fact that Glissade is no longer in his sights, Kyle is able to accept his position at Jabot with complete clarity. While he and Jack continue to build their relationship, the Abbott family continues to stand strong, a legacy that is founded on resiliency and integrity. And as for Victor, he concedes that Kyle, the Abbott heir, has proven himself to be a dangerous enemy, one who places a high value on family above all else, even though it is possible that he may never be able to forgive Kyle completely. While Sharon is staring out the window, her mind are racing back to the unsettling questions that Daniel had thrown at her earlier. It was as if the interrogation was playing over and over again in her head, with each phrase breaking through her barriers like a broken record. The questions were not only intrusive, they were also a cruel dredge of her terrible history, prodding at memories that she had worked so hard to hide. It seemed as though Daniel was trying to break open the carefully locked vault of her trauma with his line of questioning, which had been both inquisitive and persistent. She had spent years healing and making peace with her history, but now, with every look he had given her, it felt as if she was back at the beginning of the process. As she walks around her living room, tears prickling her eyes, she is brought back to the present moment by a knock that she recognizes. Nick, who is immediately aware of her pain, is the one who unlocks the door for her. Sharon's skin is pale, and her eyes have a red border around them. Without uttering a single word, she collapses into his arms, and Nick firmly grasps her grasp. It was Daniel, Sharon murmurs under her breath after a little pause. However, he simply refused to stop. He continued to dig. Although Nick's jaw tightens and anger flashes in his eyes, he maintains a calm and collected tone of voice. "Please share everything with me, Sharon. I am here to support you." Nick is listening to Sharon as she describes Daniel's approach, his icy tone, and his determination to back down. Meanwhile, Nick's anger is building with each word that Sharon expresses. The recollection of the interrogation is still very much present in the atmosphere. Sharon explains that Daniel had approached her with the presumption that he needed answers, which was a thinly veiled justification for uncovering the most difficult times in her life. Nick clenches his hands, his thoughts racing as he does so. It is difficult for him to cope with the idea that Sharon will be forced to go through this. However, Sharon makes an effort to downplay the situation by stating that she is accustomed to confronting her history and does not wish to cause any trouble. As Nick comes to the realization that Sharon is attempting to excuse Daniel's behavior, perhaps even blaming herself for it, his look becomes more resolute. But he is not going to allow her to bear that load. The insistence that you do not have to justify his actions is made by Nick. He had no authority to act in such a manner. "I'm not going to let this go on." Sharon makes a brief attempt to persuade Nick to change his mind, but Nick's determination simply grows stronger. At no point in his life has he ever felt this protective of her, and his rage toward Daniel has only increased. Sharon, in spite of her initial objections, finds solace in Nick's determination, since she has the impression that he will not allow her to deal with this situation on her own. On the following day, Nick does not spend any time in locating Daniel. In the bustling crimson lights, where the air is thick with the aroma of coffee, he finds him and brings him to justice. As he sits at a table in the corner, Daniel is completely engrossed in his own thoughts. When he is taken aback by Nick's appearance, he gives a tiny nod of thanks to show his appreciation. Nick does not waste any time in getting to the point, his tone still calm but tinged with rage. "We have to have a conversation right now." Nick is motioned to take a seat by Daniel, who raises an eyebrow but does not refuse to accept the invitation. Nick is still standing, towering over Daniel, and his eyes are burning with the intensity of the confrontation. "What the earth were you thinking when you said you were going to put Sharon through that?" The expression on Daniel's face changes from one of mild confusion to one of defensiveness. "It is not my intention to do harm to anyone, Nick." Discovering the truth is the focus here. Sharon was fairly near to. Nick shouts, "Don't you dare say it," his voice hardly containing the anger that he is feeling. "Sharon has been through so much already. It was unnecessary for you to pry into her life in such a manner. Regardless of what it is that you are trying to unearth, it is not worth tearing her down." Daniel makes an effort to persuade him to change his mind by arguing that there are some things that he must comprehend and connections that he wishes to establish. However, Nick is not going to accept it. His allegiance to Sharon is so strong that it overpowers any feelings of compassion that he may have felt in the past for Daniel. As the argument between Nick and Daniel becomes more intense, tension heightens. In a guarded and frustrated manner, Daniel raises his palms to his head. "This is not a personal matter, Nick. Trying to hurt Sharon is not my intention. Trying to hurt Sharon is not my intention. On the other hand, the truth will eventually come out, regardless of whether you like it or not." Nick inhales deeply, his tone of voice piercing. "No, Daniel," she said. "In this situation, you do not get to play the role of the hero. The only thing you're doing is bringing her down and calling it justice." The charged atmosphere is detected by a neighboring customer, who casts a glance in their direction. Daniel, who is generally composed, begins to show signs of cracking, and his voice begins to dip to a sense of desperation. "You think I wanted to carry out this task? For Sharon to be in discomfort? Because I needed to find some serenity for myself, I had to do this." Nick's patience is being tested to its limits. At peace? By taking Sharon through her most painful memories, you consider this to be a way to find peace? It is impossible for you to comprehend what it is like to be a caregiver for someone like that. Daniel's countenance changes as a result of his remarks hitting their true target. Nick discovers Sharon waiting at his place, her face displaying signs of anxiety after the intense exchange was over. He is able to detect that she has been struggling with her own feelings, caught between the desire to move on with her life and the feeling that she is being plagued by the past. While he is seated next to her, Nick carefully describes the confrontation that took place. He tells her, he claims he didn't mean to hurt you, and she agrees with him. "However, Sharon, I do not believe that. Neither justice nor resolution are at stake here." He is concerned with his own ego. When Sharon is looking for solace, she leans onto him. In a low voice, she says, "I just don't understand why he would push me in such a manner. It seemed to me that we had reached a consensus." With his fingertips gently painting calming circles on her back, Nick tenderly embraces her in his warm embrace. It's possible that he has just lost track of the person he is hurting. However, you are not the only one who feels this way. Yes, you have me. In addition, I will not allow anyone to make you feel this way again. Sharon experiences a sense of relief for the very first time since the interrogation in question. It is the comforting hug of Nick that serves as a reminder to her that she is no longer battling these battles alone herself. According to the typical pattern of rumors, word of the confrontation spreads throughout Genoa City. Both Nikki and Phyllis become aware of it, and their responses are characterized by a unique combination of wonder and concern. Nikki, whom has always been the family guardian, is contemplating taking action, but Phyllis's loyalties to her son make the situation more complicated. While all is going on, Daniel's own internal conflict intensifies, and his conscience is eating away at him. It is difficult for him to understand his own impulses, and he wonders if Nick might be correct. He had stated that his obsessive pursuit was motivated by his own unresolved difficulties. Nevertheless, it is possible that this was not the case. Even if he reaches out to a trusted confidant in the hopes of gaining answers, the shadow of his deeds continues to linger. As time goes on, Daniel comes to the realization that he cannot disregard the suffering that he has created. When he goes looking for Sharon, he discovers her at the park. As he approaches her, his heart begins to race, and he no longer possesses the customary level of self-assurance. It is with some reluctance that he continues, "Sharon, I require your apology. The fact that I went too far is now clear to me. It was not justified for me to put you through that." As she listens, Sharon's eyes wander aimlessly over his face. "Daniel, I simply do not comprehend the reason behind this. If you know what it will bring up for me, why would you push yourself so hard?" Notwithstanding the fact that her relationship with Jack Abbott has been complicated, Nikki Newman has always maintained a vigilant watch over the people she cares about. Over the past few months, she has observed a number of changes in Jack, including his unexpected absences, his late-night phone calls, and his reclusive manner, which is eerily similar to her own. After attending a charity dinner, she becomes aware of Jack's distracted and tense behavior as he disappears many times to take mysterious phone calls. This is the first indication that she is concerned about him. She makes an effort to dismiss it, but a nagging feeling in the back of her mind tells her that something is not quite right. A few days later, her suspicions are proven to be correct. Jack is unable to attend a crucial meeting with the board, and Ashley, who is often a staunch defender of Jack, is strangely silent about the matter. With the expectation of receiving answers, Nikki approaches Ashley directly. Ashley heaves a sigh, caught between her allegiance to her brother and her worry for his well-being. She finally admits that Jack appears to be struggling, but he refuses to open up to anybody. Nikki leaves feeling unsettled, but she is now more eager than ever to find out what is bothering Jack as she continues her investigation. As a result of her concerns, Nikki makes the decision to covertly follow Jack one evening in the hopes of catching a peek of the activities he has been engaging in recently. Her pursuit of him leads her to an upmarket lounge on the outskirts of Genoa City, where she watches him enter with a sense of discomfort that is all too familiar. When she enters, she discovers Jack seated at a private table with an old friend, Marcus Valenti, who is a businessman with a questionable reputation. Marcus was a ruthless player in the Genoa City business world, one who frequently operated in the shadows, striking fear into his competitors. She recognizes Marcus from her past. He was involved in the business world. Nikki's concern intensifies as she observes Jack leaning in closer to Marcus, paying close attention to what he has to say, and periodically looking about the room as if to make sure he is not being observed. Nikki comes to the conclusion that it is time to address Jack after understanding the possible harm that could arise from his becoming involved with someone as dangerous as Marcus. Nikki was surprised to discover Jack alone in his office the following morning. She starts off by asking him about his late-night trips and the pressure he is experiencing at Jabot in a subtle manner. After being taken aback, Jack initially takes a defensive stance. "Nikki, I am doing well." Although he swears that everything is going to continue as usual, his tone is not one of conviction. Jack's mood changes from one of dissatisfaction to one of veiled frustration when she brings up Marcus Valenti. He explains to her that the situation is complicated, as J-Bot has been being confronted with unforeseen financial concerns, and Marcus has contacts that could assist in stabilizing the company. Jack reassures Nikki that he is in charge of the situation, despite the fact that she warns him that Marcus's methods could come at a high cost. Despite the fact that Nikki is aware that Jack is confident that he is doing the best decision, she is unable to shake the notion that he is in over his head. At the same time as Nikki's concerns are growing, she comes into contact with Diane Jenkins, Jack's partner, who appears to be just as stressed up and preoccupied. Even though Diane is often polished and self-assured, she appears weary, with circles under her eyes indicating that she has not been sleeping well. Nikki approaches her with reluctance, hoping that she may be able to shed some light on Jack's recent decisions when she does so. Diane pauses, evidently torn, before finally admitting that she, too, is concerned about the situation. She divulges the information that Jack has not been acting like himself as of late, and that his relationship with Marcus was a result of his desperation. He has been under a great lot of pressure as a result of the financial crisis that Jabot is experiencing, and in order to protect the company from the possibility of going bankrupt, he has engaged in dangerous business transactions. In Diane's opinion, Jack is under the impression that the entire Abbott legacy is in his hands, and this perception is causing him to make decisions that he may come to regret in the future. Both Nikki and Diane are concerned about the same things, and as a result, they decide to collaborate. They make a solemn oath to discover what Marcus is up to with Jack and to assist him in evading capture before the situation becomes out of hand. Nikki, who is in a state of desperation for answers, comes to her husband, Victor Newman. Despite the fact that Victor and Jack have been rivals for a very long time, he takes Nikki's opinion into consideration and agrees to investigate the problem. Jack's desperation is being used by Marcus to mislead him into making a high-stakes investment with unlawful undertones. If this investment is uncovered, it might put not only Jack's job in jeopardy, but possibly his freedom. His team swiftly uncovers this information. The defensive instincts that Victor possesses are activated. He cautions Nikki that Jack may be subject to severe legal repercussions if he does not escape the situation as soon as possible. As soon as Nikki became aware of the gravity of the situation, she experienced an even more intense sense of urgency. She begs Victor to find a method to intercede without exposing Jack to public controversy, knowing that such revelation would not only ruin Jack, but would also destroy the entire Abbott family. She has pleaded with Victor to find a solution to resolve the situation. Nikki's heart sinks as she finds out that Jack is going ahead with Marcus's plan despite the hazards involved. Because she has no other choice, she makes the decision to confront Marcus on her own. When Nikki encounters Marcus in a private club, she cautions him to avoid Jack because she is fully aware of the kind of relationship that Marcus has with Jack. He laughs at her warning and reveals that he is not even close to being finished with Jack, and that any attempts to hinder his intentions will have consequences. With a sense of confinement, Nikki makes one final visit to Jack, pleading with him to change his decision before it is too late. At the same time as he is visibly confused, Jack confides that he feels responsible for protecting the legacy of his family, and that he is already in too deep to pull out of the situation. At long last, Nikki breaks down and tells Jack that he is putting everything on the line, including his freedom, his family, and his future, for a transaction that might potentially leave him with nothing less than nothing. Jack's steely resolve begins to waver, and she notices a hint of fear beginning to appear in his eyes. At the end of a restless night of contemplation, Jack makes the decision to see Marcus and make an effort to back out of the agreement. Marcus, on the other hand, is not easy to let go of. He holds over Jack a sequence of documents that establish a connection between Jack and the unlawful operations, and he insists that Jack meet his commitments or face the possibility of ruin. Nikki, following Jack once more, is present during the tense discussion that takes place. As Marcus storms out of the room, she rushes to Jack's side and urges him to finally recognize the need for assistance. The intervention of Victor, who pulls some strings in order to free Jack from Marcus's hold, is successful. In spite of the fact that the procedure is not devoid of challenges, Victor's influence is successful in nullifying the agreement. However, this does not come without a major cost to Jabot's financial circumstances. Following the event, Jack is left to deal with the consequences of the situation. Nikki is the recipient of his confession, in which he admits that he has never felt so vulnerable and embarrassed of his choices. Nikki gives her assistance and reminds him that his strength rests in his capacity to triumph over challenges during this difficult time. However, despite the fact that the incident has caused tension in their relationship, Diane continues to support him. The family gets together and acknowledges that although Jack's struggle almost destroyed their legacy, it also drew them closer together by bringing them closer together. Because of this event, they are reminded of the depths to which they will go in order to protect each other, as well as the perils that come with being desperate and ambitious. A fresh determination. Nikki and Jack have a moment of silence together as the dust begins to settle. After going through the tragedy, Jack expresses his gratitude to Nikki for her unflinching support. She gives him a grin and reminds him that they have gone through too much for them to give up on each other at this point. Nikki is left with a sense of serenity when they part ways for the simple reason that she is aware that Jack has discovered a means to move forward and that she will always be there to watch his back. Heather Stevens' sudden, tragic death sends shockwaves through Genoa City, leaving her family and friends stunned and devastated. A dedicated lawyer known for her tenacity, Heather had been working tirelessly on a high-stakes case involving Damien Russo, a dangerous figure with ties to powerful individuals in the city. Her unexpected death, right before the trial, feels too coincidental for those close to her, sparking suspicion and fear. A chilling discovery. When Paul Williams, Heather's father, receives news of her passing, he is shattered. Heather had been a bright force in his life, his daughter and a colleague, and he struggles to believe that her death was an accident. Desperate for answers, he launches his own investigation, despite warnings from those who fear the repercussions of digging too deep. Meanwhile, Daniel Romalotti, Heather's ex, finds himself overwhelmed with guilt. The last time they spoke, Daniel had urged her to be cautious with the case, worried that it would put her in danger. But Heather's determination won out. She had been adamant about fighting for justice, unwilling to back down even as the case grew riskier. Now, with her gone, Daniel can't shake the feeling that she was silenced, especially since she had hinted at uncovering explosive information about the crime syndicate. A secret journal. In the days following Heather's death, Christine Blair discovers Heather's personal journal, where she had detailed her fears and suspicions surrounding her case against Russo. In it, Heather had written about receiving threatening phone calls and feeling like someone was watching her. The journal also reveals a list of names of people Heather suspected to be involved in Genoa City's hidden world of corruption. One name stands out, a trusted business figure who is beloved in Genoa City. Shocked, Christine shares the information with Paul, who recognizes the name immediately. Paul begins to piece together that Heather may have been close to uncovering a dark alliance that stretches across the city's elite, a web of corruption. As Paul dives deeper into Heather's notes, he starts seeing connections between the city's prominent families and Russo's operations. One disturbing pattern becomes clear. These powerful individuals are using their influence to protect their interests, even if it means eliminating anyone who threatens to expose their secrets. Paul becomes fixated on one particular name, realizing that this individual likely played a role in orchestrating Heather's death. Though he's known this person for years, he's now forced to confront the possibility that this ally was playing a darker game. Determined to expose them, Paul enlists the help of Rosales to gather evidence, despite knowing that this investigation could make him a target as well. Daniel's quest for justice. Haunted by the loss, Daniel channels his grief into uncovering the truth about Heather's last days. He approaches people from Genoa City's underworld, seeking information on Russo's operation. In the process, he discovers that Heather's case had the potential to dismantle a large portion of Russo's empire, a win that would have crippled Russo and his allies. However, the deeper Daniel digs, the more danger he attracts. Those close to him, including his mother Phyllis, urge him to abandon his search, worried that he'll meet the same fate as Heather. But Daniel remains undeterred, consumed by the need to bring justice to Heather's memory. He becomes a man on a mission, determined to expose everyone involved. The shocking twist. Just as Daniel and Paul close in on the truth, they uncover a shocking revelation. The business figure Heather had mentioned in her journal has close ties not only to Russo, but to someone within the Newman family. The discovery raises questions about where loyalties truly lie in Genoa City, casting doubt on figures who had seemed untouchable. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Paul is forced to confront this person directly. In a tense confrontation, the business figure reveals their true motives. Heather's investigation threatened to bring down an empire built on secrecy and deception. Taking her out was a necessary move to protect the interests of several powerful players who couldn't risk their operations being exposed. Paul is furious but realizes that bringing this person to justice will require more than just confronting them. To protect his family and ensure that Heather's death isn't in vain, Paul works with Christine, gathering ironclad evidence to publicly expose the corruption network. The aftermath. In the days following, Paul announces the launch of the Heather Stevens Foundation, dedicated to fighting corruption and supporting victims of injustice, ensuring Heather's legacy lives on in Genoa City. Daniel, forever changed by the experience,